Good morning. Today we are going to read through chapter 22 of Gone with the Wind by Margaret Mitchell. This is not just going to be reading the words, we're actually going to stop and talk about interesting vocabulary words, interesting words and phrases. So if you're learning English, this is the best way to improve your vocabulary if that's what you're trying to accomplish. And we're doing this live. So if you're watching this with me right now live, then I really want to encourage you to ask questions as we go. What does this mean? What does that mean? I don't understand this. That's what makes it interesting. That's the whole point of this video. If you don't ask questions, I will just stop and explain words or phrases that I think you probably don't know or that you probably don't understand. All right, well, let's get started with chapter 22. There would never again be an afternoon as long as this one, or as hot, or as full of lazy, insolent flies. That word insolent means like disrespectful, but I just wanted to check the official definition of that word insolent. Rude, arrogant, lack of respect, disrespectful. Okay, that's not bad. Not a bad definition. Okay. They swarmed on Melanie despite the fans Scarlet kept in constant motion. Her arms ached from swinging the wide palmetto leaf. A palmetto is a type of palm tree. So she's fanning Melanie, who's having her baby and who's sick, trying to make her more comfortable with a palmetto leaf. All of her efforts seemed futile. And we've seen that word many times before, futile. That's a pretty useful word, which means there's no point in trying. You're not going to accomplish your goal. So when you call something futile, it means you'll never reach your goal. Don't even try. Stop trying. So here it sees she's trying to make Melanie more comfortable, but that's futile. She can't. Melanie's in a lot of pain. She's very uncomfortable, very hot. Doing this is not helping her. It's futile. For while she brushed them from Melanie's moist face, Boris says, "Long time no see." That's right, I haven't seen you in a while. Where have you been? Busy working? All of her efforts seemed futile, for while she brushed them from Melanie's moist face, they crawled on her clammy feet and legs and made her jerk them weakly and cry. "Please, on my feet." "Oh, I've been fine, just, well, we're in the middle of Gone with the Wind, which is a very, very long book." But we're getting close to the middle of the book, thank goodness. So let's see how long it takes. The room was in semi-gloom. Gloom means like darkness, depression, unhappiness. And semi means half. So there was like a feeling, like a feeling of gloom, a half feeling, not completely gloomy, but pretty gloomy. The room was in semi-gloom, for Scarlet had pulled down the shades. So maybe they're just talking about darkness, but there's always, if you say gloom, that always has a touch of sadness in it too. Wait, we better check. You almost never see the word gloom unless it's talking about depression, darkness and depression. Partial or total darkness, a state of depression or despondency. I guarantee that if you say gloom, people will automatically think dark and depressing. They associate those two things together. But I think here maybe it just means darkness, semi-gloom. So they pulled the shades down a little to keep out the light, to make the room maybe a little bit cooler. The room was in semi-gloom, for Scarlet had pulled down the shades to shut out the heat and brightness. pinpoints of sunlight came in through minute holes. So if you say minute, that means 60 seconds. But if you say minute, which is spelled exactly the same way, it means very, 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 very small. So minute holes. Very, very, very small holes. Fari Bor says, I've seen Gone with the Wind. Clark Gable was sparkling with his role. Yeah, well, the book is actually pretty different. There are quite a few things. Like, for example, Scarlett has a son from her first husband. That's not in the movie. That's really weird. But they don't mention him very much, so I don't know what will happen to him in the book. Maybe they'll continue not mentioning him. Who knows? It makes me wonder if they actually are going to have a daughter later, or maybe it's the son who dies on a horse. I don't know. We'll see. So minute means 60 seconds. Minute means very, very, very small. They're pronounced differently, but spelled exactly the same way. The room was an oven, and Scarlett's sweat-drenched clothes. I think we saw the word drenched in the last chapter. And remember, drench means like completely wet, 100% wet. And it's used a lot of times talking about sweat. Oh, I have to change my clothes. It's so hot. I'm drenched in sweat. That means I'm completely wet with sweat. Or I forgot my umbrella and it started raining and now I'm drenched. That means I'm completely 100%. Everything is wet. Everything. The room was an oven, and Scarlett's sweat-drenched clothes never dried, but became wetter and stickier as the hours went by. Prissy was crouched in a corner. Crouching is when you're like this. Maybe you're afraid somebody's going to hit you. Prissy was crouched in the corner. Sweating too, and smelled so abominably. Abominably means really, really horrible. And smelled so abominably, Scarlett would have sent her from the room, had she not feared the girl would take to her heels if once out of sight of Melanie. Melanie lay on the bed on a sheet dark with perspiration and splotched with dampness. Let me show you a picture of a splotch. When liquid is spread in this sort of way on something, you can call that a splotch. These are all splotches. So there are splotches of sweat on the bed sheets. Fari Boris says like splash? No, because splash, let me show you the difference. Well, splotch is one-dimensional. But a splash is what happens if you throw something in water. It's the behavior of water when it is disturbed. So this is a splash. So maybe you could think of a splotch as being attached to something going on this way, and a splash is going up like this. It's like a disturbance in water. That's the difference between a splotch and a splash. So the bed sheet was dark with perspiration and splotched with dampness where Scarlett had spilled some water. She twisted endlessly to one side, then to the other, to the left, to the right, and back again. Sometimes she tried to sit up and fell back and began twisting again. At first she had tried to keep from crying out, biting her lips until they were raw. Raw is used for uncooked food, uncooked meat, raw meat. So sushi, for example, is raw fish. It's uncooked fish. But if you do this, if you do something like this for a very, very long time, this would become very red, very irritated, and maybe there'll start to be blood. And this would be raw. Then you would describe this as a raw part of your body. If you're doing this all the time, Fari Boris, you're in Canada, right? So, but I don't remember if it's Toronto or Vancouver, because there were two people from Canada, and one person was in Toronto, and the other person was, well, if you're in Toronto, where it gets extremely cold, in the winter time. Oh, Vancouver. Yeah, I don't know if this will happen. Maybe it would happen in Vancouver, but in the winter time, your lips will become very dry, and maybe you'll start doing this a lot. And eventually, there's actually a special word for that. It's called chapped. Your lips become very, very dry. We call those chapped lips. I think I better put that word up here if I can find my layers panel here. But another way that you could describe that situation would be raw. Your lips are raw. But have you had that experience in Vancouver? I don't know if where you're originally from, if you would have that experience, but definitely in the cold weather, you get chapped lips. I could show you a picture of that. Although it will be very disgusting to look at a picture of chapped lips, I think. Yeah, that's pretty bad. But another way that you could describe this is that the lips are raw. They become very dry, almost dead, or something like that. Okay, so Melanie's been doing this. She's in pain and she's going like this. And now her lips are raw. But you could also say that they're chapped. Oh, let's see. Sometimes she tried to sit up and fell back and began twisting again. At first, she had tried to keep from crying out, biting her lips until they were raw. And Scarlet, whose nerves were as raw. Oh, to have raw nerves. Again, think about this. If you're doing this all the time, you're going to have a raw, you're going to rub your arm raw. But to have raw nerves means something is straining or putting a lot of pressure on your feelings. And at some point you can't tolerate it anymore. And then you say, my nerves are raw. It means stop it. I can't take any more pressure. I can't handle this situation anymore. But that's in a very high stress situation. So if you're in a war or something, and every day you're scared and you're hearing bombs, or you're in a high crime area and you're always paranoid and looking around, eventually you can say, my nerves are raw, because you're always alert and paying attention and you're tired. Faribor says, I apply lip cream as a treatment. Yeah, well, the famous, in the US, I don't know about Canada, but in the US, the famous thing is chapstick. I used to use that. I used to be addicted to chapstick. And the other thing is Carmex. And I like the smell of Carmex. It has a nice vanilla smell, but I don't think it works, or it just works very temporarily. But anyway, I stopped using both of those things. It's better to just go through it without using anything. Because if you start using those things, then you become addicted to them and you always have to use them. At least that was my experience. Melly, for God's sakes, don't try to be brave. Yell if you want to. There's nobody to hear you but us. As the afternoon wore on. That's a phrasal verb. If something wears on, it's continuing, but it's going very slowly, and it's making you tired, and you wish it would end. So as the afternoon continued, but also the afternoon is going very slowly, and I'm so tired, and I just want it to end. That's the thing about phrasal verbs. They always give you this extra feeling of, you can just say, as the afternoon progressed, if you want to. But that doesn't give you the feeling of, oh, I'm so tired. I just want it to end. I just want this to be finished. And that's why you use the phrasal verb wear on. It gives you this extra idea. As the afternoon wore on, Melanie moaned, whether she wanted to be brave or not. And sometimes she screamed. When she did, Scarlet dropped her head into her hands and covered her ears and twisted her body and wished that she herself were dead. Anything was preferable to being a helpless witness to such pain. Anything was better than being tied here, waiting for a baby that took such a long time coming, waiting when for all she knew the Yankees were actually at 5 points. She fervently wished she had paid more attention to the whispered conversations of matrons on the subject of childbirth. If only she had been more interested in such matters, she'd know whether Melanie was taking a long time or not. She had a vague memory. Vague means unclear. So if you say, I have a vague memory of something, it means I can remember a little bit, but not very much of something. She had a vague memory of one of Aunt Pitty's stories of a friend who was in labor for 2 days and died without ever having the baby. Suppose Melanie should go on like this for 2 days, but Melanie was so delicate. She couldn't stand 2 days of this pain. She'd die soon if the baby didn't hurry. How could she ever face Ashley if she were still alive and tell him that Melanie had died after she had promised to take care of her? At first, Melanie wanted to hold Scarlet's hand when the pain was bad, but she clamped down on it so hard she nearly broke the bones. After an hour of this, Scarlet's hands were swollen and bruised, and she could hardly flex them. So Melanie is in so much pain. For an hour, she was squeezing Scarlet's hand. So Scarlet's hand was very, well, I think we've seen that word swollen before. Let's see what kind of pictures we get with swollen. Swollen it's a useful word. It's an irregular verb. Swell, swole, swollen. And it's useful because it's what happens when there's a problem with your body. It's when part of your body becomes big because of pain. Or maybe some medical condition. With these feet, it looks like some kind of medical condition. But, if somebody hits you or you get hit very hard, then it will become big temporarily. And that's swollen. Doctor, what's wrong? My face is swollen. You see all these swollen. Swollen. So Melanie was grabbing Scarlet's hand for an hour like this. And now Scarlet's hand was swollen. And in a lot of pain. Faribor says infection. Well, an infection can cause swelling, but I don't think that it has to be an infection. There could be other reasons why your body becomes, or part of your body becomes swollen. Okay, well, you get the idea of swollen. We don't have to look at any more of these pictures, I think. But that's a useful word. Scarlet's hands were so swollen and bruised that she could hardly flex them. So flexing means doing this, like being able to move them. Same word as flexible, but flex is a verb. So she could hardly do this. She knotted two long towels together. And tied them to the foot of the bed and put the knotted end in Melanie's hands. So Scarlet put some towels on the bed so Melanie could grab the towels instead. Melanie hung onto it as though it were a lifeline, straining, pulling it taut, slackening it, tearing it. Throughout the afternoon, her voice went on like an animal dying in a trap. Occasionally, she dropped the towel and rubbed her hands feebly, looked up at Scarlet with eyes enormous with pain. Faribor said, I always had a problem with the word taut. What is it? What does it mean? Well, I think it's just a variation on the word tight. Let me just make sure about that. Yeah, pulled tight. It's not really a terribly common word, but it comes from the same word as tight, T-I-G-H-T, which is the opposite of loose. I don't think that there are many times where you would use it in a real normal conversation. I think you could see it in a book sometimes, but I can't think of any time I've heard anybody use that in a conversation. So I don't think it's a word to worry about too much unless you like to read. But it's very similar to it comes from the same word as tight. How is it being used here? Melanie hung onto it as though it were a lifeline, straining, pulling it taut. See, a normal person would say pulling it tight. So it's just, I think, more of a literary word than it is something that you would use in regular conversation. Talk to me. Please talk to me, she whispered, and Scarlet would gabble something until Melanie again gripped the knot and again began writhing. Remember, we've seen that word writhing. I didn't realize what a common word that was, but it's been in several books. But writhing is the movement of a snake. And so if you're writhing in pain, that's, oh, it hurts so bad. The dim room swam with heat and pain and droning flies. And time went by on such dragging feet that Scarlet could scarcely remember the morning. She felt as if she had been in the steaming, dark, sweating place all her life. She wanted very much to scream. Every time Melanie did, and only by biting her lip so hard it infuriated her, could she restrain herself and drive off hysteria. It's too bad Yadov isn't here today because we have an inversion here. Once Wade came tiptoeing. By the way, Wade Faribors is Scarlet's son. That's her son. He's not in the movie. Once Wade came tiptoeing up the stairs and stood outside the door, wailing. Remember, wailing is loud crying. That's wailing. Wade hungry. So remember, children, and the R sound is a very difficult sound to produce in English, and so little children can't do that when they're very young. And so they pronounce a W instead of an R. That's why it says Wade hungry. That's Wade is hungry. Scarlet started to go to him, but Melanie whispered, "Don't leave me, please. I can stand it when you're here." So Scarlet sent Prissy down to warm up the breakfast hominy and feed him. For herself, she felt that she could never eat again after this afternoon. The clock on the mantel had stopped, and she had no way of telling time. But as the heat in the room lessened and the bright pinpoints of light grew duller, she pulled the shade aside and saw to her surprise that it was late afternoon and the sun, a ball of crimson. Remember that crimson is a color of red. It's a shade of red, but it's also the color of blood. It's that color red. So they use that a lot in books to evoke in your head the idea of blood or panic or something like that. So it's always interesting when they use that word crimson. The sun, a ball of crimson, was far down the sky. Somehow, she had imagined it would remain broiling hot noon forever. She wondered passionately what was going on downtown. Had all the troops moved out yet? Had the Yankees come? Would the Confederates march away without even a fight? Then she remembered with a sick dropping in her stomach how few Confederates there were, how many men Sherman had, and how well fed they were. Sherman, the name of Satan himself, did not frighten her half so much. But there was no time for thinking now. As Melanie called for water, for a cold towel on her head, to be fanned, to have the flies brushed away from her face. When twilight came on and Prissy, scurrying like a black wraith — a wraith is a ghost — lit a lamp, Melanie became weaker. She began calling for Ashley over and over, as if in a delirium, until the hideous monotony gave Scarlet a fierce desire to smother her voice with a pillow. Scarlet wanted to take a pillow and put it over Melanie's. Oh, Scarlet. Smothering, when you smother something, that's like completely covering it. So when you talk about smothering someone with a pillow, it means putting a pillow over their face until they die. But you'll see that word smother on menus in restaurants, and it's a good thing. So chicken smothered in sauce. That sounds very delicious. It's like chicken completely covered in sauce. Or steak smothered in onions. That sounds very delicious. That's steak with lots and lots of cooked onions on it. So you see that word a lot on menus. But here it's bad. That means she wants to take the pillow and put it over Melanie's face until Melanie's dead. Perhaps the doctor would come after all, if he would only come quickly. Hope raising its head, she turned to Prissy and ordered her to run quickly to the Meads' house and see if he were there, or Mrs. Mead. And if he's not there, ask Mrs. Mead or Cookie what to do. Beg them to come. Prissy was off with a clatter. To be off means to be leaving. Oh, I'm off. To be off. I'm off. That means I'm leaving. I'm going. Bye. Prissy was off with a clatter. A clatter is a kind of noise, with some chaos. I think it just means she ran very quickly, and it made some noise. And Scarlet watched her hurrying down the street, going faster than she had ever dreamed the worthless child could move. After a prolonged time, she was back, alone. The doctor ain't been home all day, Soon would he might go off with the soldiers. I have no idea. So it just means I don't know what that first word is, but she's saying the doctor wasn't at home, and maybe sound. I don't know. But I guess maybe Prissy thinks he went off to help the soldiers. Soon he would move. I'm not going to spend time trying to figure that out. Miss Scarlet, Mr. Phil ceased. Oh. Their son is dead. They lost all of their sons in the war, and now their youngest one, who was too young to fight, had to go fight because finally Atlanta was under attack. And now he's dead. So Scarlet says, Dad? Yes'm, says Prissy, expanding with importance. Talbot, day coachman, told me he was shot. Never mind that. And then, see Miss Mead, Cookie say Miss Mead, she washing him and fixing to bury him for the Yankees gets here. Cookie say, if and the pain get too bad, just you put a knife under Miss Mellie's bed and cut the pain in two. So Prissy is saying that Mrs. Mead is washing her son's dead body and preparing him to be buried because she wants to bury him before the Yankees arrive into the town. And then one of the other slaves told Prissy, well, one way to help Melanie feel better is to put a knife under her pillow, and that will cut the pain in half, like a superstition or something. Scarlet wanted to slap her again for this helpful information, but Melanie opened wide, dilated eyes and whispered, Dear, are the Yankees coming? No, said Scarlet stoutly. Prissy's a liar. Yes'm, I sure is, Prissy agreed fervently. So Prissy realized that she's making Melanie panic. So she agrees with Scarlet. Yes, I'm a liar. They're not coming. They don't want to worry Melanie. They're coming, whispered Melanie, undeceived, and buried her face in the pillow. Her voice came out muffled. Muffling is when you're talking, when everybody was wearing the masks and maybe you couldn't understand them very well. You could call that muffled. I'm sorry, I can't understand you. Your voice is muffled. Muffled voice. So Melanie put her face in the pillow and she was talking, but you couldn't understand her because her voice was muffled. My poor baby. And after a long interval, oh, Scarlet, you mustn't stay here. You must go and take Wade. What Melanie said was no more than Scarlet had been thinking, but hearing it put into words infuriated her. To infuriate someone or to be infuriated means to become very angry, to be made very angry. So when Melanie said that, Scarlet became very angry. It infuriated her. It made her very angry. Shamed her as if her secret cowardice was written in her face. Don't be a goose. I'm not afraid. Faribor says angry. Yes, that's angry. You know I won't leave you. You might as well. I'm gonna die. And she began moaning again. Moaning. Scarlet came down the stairs slowly, like an old woman feeling her way, clinging to the banisters lest she fall. Her legs were leaden. Lead is a type of metal, and it's very heavy. So when things are described as lead, when it says her legs were leaden, it means her legs were very heavy. They were like a very heavy metal, very difficult for her to move her legs. They were so heavy. Trembling with fatigue and strain, and she shivered. Shivering is like this. Oh. If you're very cold, if you've ever been very cold, you shiver. Oh, it's so cold. Sometimes you shiver with fright. Oh, that's scary. Or shiver in disgust. Oh, that's disgusting. As she shivered with cold from the clammy sweat that soaked her body, feebly she made her way onto the front porch and sank down on the top step. She sprawled back against a pillar. Sprawling is when you spread out everywhere. So she leaned up against the pillar and was very relaxed. And with a shaking hand unbuttoned her basque halfway down her bosom. The night was drenched in warm, soft darkness, and she lay staring in it, dull as an ox. It was all over. Melanie was not dead, and the small baby boy, who made noises like a young kitten, was receiving his first bath at Prissy's hands. Melanie was asleep. How could she sleep after that nightmare of screaming pain and ignorant midwifery that hurt more than it helped? Why wasn't she dead? Scarlet knew that she herself would have died under such handling. But when it was over, Melanie had even whispered, so weakly she had to bend over to hear, "Thank you." And then she had gone to sleep. How could she sleep? Scarlet forgot that she too had gone to sleep after Wade was born. She forgot everything. Her mind was a vacuum. The world was a vacuum. There had been no life before this endless day, and there would be none hereafter. Only a heavily hot night. Only the sound of her hoarse, tired breathing. We've seen that word horse before. Not horse, the type of horse you ride, which is H-O-R-S-E. But this is horse, H-O-A-R-S-E. Sounds exactly the same. But they're very different words. Have you ever met someone who's smoked cigarettes for many, many years? They talk like this. And that's a hoarse voice. Faribor says a thick sound. Yeah, it's like a very thick sound. If you get sick, if you have a cold, if you're coughing all the time, then maybe after 2 or 3 days, you'll talk like this. "Oh, sorry, my voice is a little hoarse because I'm sick." Yet Faribor says rough, thick. Yeah, those are good. Those are good ways to describe hoarse. Or if you're screaming a lot, afterwards, maybe you sound like this. Your voice is hoarse. So a hoarse voice is a tired voice, really. Well, I'm just going to take a 1-minute break. Okay, I'll be right back. Sorry about that. Thank you for waiting. I try not to do that, but sometimes it just can't be helped. Okay. I saw another word in here that I thought, oh yeah, okay, let's go back. So there'd been no life before this endless day, and there would be none hereafter. Only a heavily hot night, only the sound of her hoarse, tired breathing. Only the sweat trickling coldly from the armpit to the waist. Trickle is like a little bit of water, like little drops of water. That's what trickling is. It's something slow. It's always used for water. It can be used for other things too. Like if you imagine you're the manager of a restaurant. Oh, is your restaurant busy? Well, at dinner time, yes, around 7 o'clock, it's very busy. But usually during the afternoon, we just get a trickle of people. That means but really trickle means little drops of water. But you can use it in other circumstances where there's just one, and then another, and then another. You can use it in that way. That's pretty common, actually, especially talking about business. After about 9 o'clock, business slows to a trickle. It's a pretty common word. So the sweat trickling coldly from her armpit to waist, from hip to knee, clammy, sticky, chilling. See, we've seen that word clammy several times, and I don't know if you know what a clam is. Let's see. But I'll show you. It's a useful word, especially for when you're feeling sick. So this is a clam. Well, Fari Boris says, "Oh, is clammy cold?" Well, it's a combination of cold and wet. Imagine the feeling. Imagine touching this. It's a very horrible feeling. It's cold. It's an unpleasant feeling, a very bad feeling. It's cold and wet. Did you ever shake somebody's hand and their hand is cold and wet? That's a clammy handshake. Or if you feel sick, sometimes you feel hot and cold at the same time. So you feel hot and you start sweating, but then suddenly you feel cold, and then you feel clammy. That's how you would describe that horrible feeling. She heard her own breath pass from loud evenness to spasmodic sobbing, but her eyes were dry and burning as though there'd never been tears, and there would never be tears in them again. Slowly, laboriously, she heaved herself up. Heaving is pulling really hard. She heaved herself up over and pulled her heavy skirts up to her thighs. She was warm and cold and sticky all at the same time, and the feeling of the night air on her limbs was refreshing. She thought dully what Aunt Pitty would say if she could see her sprawled on the front porch with her skirts up and her drawers showing, but she didn't care. She didn't care about anything. Time had stood still. It might just be after twilight, and it might be midnight. She didn't know or care. She heard sounds of moving feet upstairs and thought, "May the Lord damn Prissy," before her eyes closed and something like sleep descended upon her. Then, after an interminate, dark interval, Prissy was beside her, chattering on in a pleased way. "We done right good, Miss Scarlett. I specs Ma couldn't done no better." So Prissy is saying, we did a great job. My mother couldn't have done a better job. From the shadows, Scarlett glared at her, too tired to rail, too tired to upbraid, too tired to enumerate Prissy's offenses. Her boastful assumption of experience she didn't possess, her fright, her blundering awkwardness. Blundering is, if you make a blunder, that's making a mistake, making a stupid mistake, making a social mistake. And so her blundering awkwardness, she was making a lot of mistakes. She was acting very bad. So Scarlett's she's too tired to complain about it, but Prissy is taking all the credit for delivering the baby. She keeps saying we did a great job delivering the baby, and Scarlett's thinking, you didn't do anything, you just made it worse. But she's too tired to even say anything. Her utter inefficiency when the emergency was hot, the misplacing of the scissors, the spilling of the basin of water on the bed, the dropping of the newborn baby, and now she bragged about how good she had been. And the Yankees wanted to free the Negroes? Well, the Yankees were welcome to them. She lay back against a pillar in silence, and Prissy, aware of her mood, tiptoed away in the darkness of the porch. After a long interval in which her breathing finally quieted and her mind steadied, Scarlett heard the sound of faint voices from up the road. Tramping of many feet. Tramping is the sound of boom, 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 boom. The sound of feet moving. The tramping of many feet coming from the north. Soldiers! She sat up, pulling down her skirts. Although she knew no one could see her in the darkness as they came abreast the house, an indeterminate number, passing like shadows, she called to them, "Oh, please!" A shadow disengaged itself from the mass and came to the gate. "Are you going? Are you leaving us?" This shadow seemed to take off a hat, and a quiet voice came from the darkness. "Yes, ma'am. That's what we're doing. We're the last of the men from the breastworks. About a mile north from here. That's like 2 kilometers. Is the army really retreating?" "Yes, ma'am. You see, the Yankees are coming." Yankees are coming. She'd forgotten that. Her throat suddenly contracted, and she could say nothing more. The shadow moved away, merged itself with the other shadows, and feet, boom, 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 tramped into the darkness, tramping the sound of feet, boom, 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 boom. The Yankees are coming. The Yankees are coming. That's what the rhythm of the feet said. That's what her suddenly bumping heart thudded out, each beat. The Yankees are coming. "The Yankees is coming?" bawled Prissy, shrinking close to her. "Oh, Miss Scarlett, they'll kill us all. They'll run their bayonets in our stomachs. So Prissy's thinking about how she's describing how the Yankees are going to kill them. So Scarlett says, "Oh, hush," which means shut up. It was terrifying enough to think these things without hearing them in trembling words. Renewed fear swept her. What could she do? How could she escape? Where could she turn for help? Every friend had failed her. Suddenly she thought of Rhett Butler, and calm dispelled her fears. Why hadn't she thought of him this morning, when she'd been tearing about like a chicken with its head cut off? You know, that's a very common expression. To run around with like a chicken with your head cut off means to be panicking. So imagine you cut off the head of a chicken, the body still runs around until it dies. So that's something that you use when you're talking about panicking. "Oh, I was so scared, I was running around like a chicken with my head cut off." That's a very, very common expression. Fari Boris says bayonet is used in an old fight. Yes, a bayonet is a type of gun that has a knife in the front. So Let me show you a picture. Whoops. Here's a picture of a bayonet. So Prissy is saying they're going to put the bayonet in our stomach. She hated him. But he was strong and smart, and he wasn't afraid of the Yankees. And he was still in town, of course. Of course, she was mad at him, but she could overlook such things at a time like this. And he had a horse and carriage, too. Oh, why hadn't she thought of him before? He could take them all the way from this doomed place, away from the Yankees, somewhere, anywhere. She turned to Prissy and spoke with feverish urgency. You know where Captain Butler lives? At the Atlanta Hotel. Yes'm, but... Well, go there now, as quick as you can, and run and tell him I want him. I want him to come quickly and bring his horse and carriage or an ambulance if he can get one. Tell him about the baby. Tell him I want him to take us out of here. Go now. Hurry. She sat upright and gave Prissy a push to speed her to her feet. God almighty, Miss Scarlet, I's scared to go running round in the dark by myself. S'pose the Yankees gets me. So Prissy is saying, I'm afraid of running around in the dark in town. What if the Yankees do something to me? If you run fast, you can catch up with those soldiers, and they won't let the Yankees get you. Hurry. I's scared, s'posin' Captain Butler ain't at the hotel. So, Prissy says, suppose the Captain Butler isn't there. What do I do then? Then ask where he is. Haven't you any gumption? Gumption is like courage. If he isn't at the hotel, go to the bar rooms on Decatur Street and ask for him. Go to Belle Watling's house. Hunt for him. You fool! Don't you see that if you don't hurry and find him, the Yankees will surely get us all? Miss Scarlet, Ma would wear me out with a cotton stalk did I go to a bar room or a hoe house. So Belle Watling is a prostitute, and a disrespectful way to refer to a prostitute is a whore, which is spelled WHORE. But in certain ways of speaking, people will, instead of saying whore, which again means it's a kind of like a swear word, they'll say hoe, which is spelled HO. And so that's, for example, Prissy is saying it like that. A hoe house is a house of prostitutes. And actually that word hoe has become very common in modern slang. So you'll hear that all the time, I think, if you hear people who use that kind of language. It's pretty common. So Prissy is saying that Ma would wear me out with a cotton stalk. A stalk is like a long piece, like a long branch. So she's saying her mother would beat her if she ever discovered that Prissy went to a bar room or a house where prostitutes are. Scarlet pulled herself to her feet. Well, I'll wear you out if you don't. So Prissy says, my mother would beat me if she ever discovered that I went to a bar room or a whorehouse. And Scarlet says, well, I'll do it if you don't. You could stand outside in the street and yell for him, can't you? Or ask somebody if he's inside. Get going. When Prissy still lingered, shuffling her feet and mouthing, Scarlet gave her another push, which nearly sent her headlong down the front steps. You'll go, or I'll send you down the river. You'll never see your mother again, or anybody you know, and I'll sell you for a field hand, too. Hurry. God almighty, Miss Scarlet. But under the determined pressure of her mistress, But under the determined pressure of her mistress's hand, she started down the steps. The front gate clicked, and Scarlet cried, "Run, you goose!" She heard the patter of Prissy's feet as she broke into a trot, and then the sound died away on the soft earth. All right, well, that was the end of chapter 22. Thank you for watching, listening. Thank you for your questions and comments, and I hope that you come back again when we read chapter 23, which I think it won't be tomorrow, but probably on Wednesday. Probably, oh wait, what is today? Today's Monday, Tuesday? Yeah, probably on Wednesday morning. So far, I'm free in the morning, so I hope that you will watch again on Wednesday at the same time. I don't know if it's morning for you. It's morning for me. All right. Well, thank you for watching, and I hope you come back and watch again. Goodbye.